folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my June wrap up. I read 14 things in June and all except one of them were electronic. So, yay. A lot of them were quite short. I did a lot of Hugo reading and a lot of rereading. But I will get started really quickly. So the first thing I read in June was The Court Magician by Sarah Pinsker. That was a short story from the Hugo nomination list. It didn't really do much for me. I mean, I was a bit disappointed actually. I really liked some Sarah Pinsker stories in the past. But yeah, it just wasn't my thing really. It was about a court magician who does magic by losing, there's a cost. So he speaks the word, but he loses something. And it just didn't really do my thing. The second thing I read was physical, and that was Martha Wells' The Artificial Condition, which is the second in the Murderbot Diaries series of novellas from Tor.com. This was fun. Murderbot was seeking answers to Murderbot's own past, and ended up involved in someone else's shenanigans on the way, and there was also hitched a ride on a ship with an AI that was quite interested in Murderbot, and just as independent, I suppose, independently minded as Murderbot. So that was fun. I really quite enjoyed that. Then, because in the start of June I was quite stressed through life stuff, I did some rereading of my favourite Jane Austen variations. You've heard of me talk about them before. So I read Out of Obscurity by Jean Roland, which is the one where Elizabeth is discovered to be actually the daughter of the Earl of Matlock and Darcy's cousin. Chaos Comes to Kent, where the entire Bennet family goes to visit Mr. Collins instead of Mr. Collins coming to visit them, and Lady Catherine takes to matchmaking. In the middle of all that, I did read another of the short stories for the Hugo list, which was The Rose Maria Drinking and Admiration Society by T. Kingfisher. This is probably my favourite of the short stories, just because it made me laugh. Because it was basically a group of fae drinking themselves stupid, remembering the one woman, the human woman, that all of them had basically shagged, and she was just like, oh, okay, and she left. And they're, manfully not pining for her, but really they're pining for her. So it kind of turns the whole seductive fae thing on its head, which is hilarious. Then I was back to my Austen variations. So I read The Mistress of Longbourn, which is another Jan Roland where Lizzie and Kitty are the only survivors of a flu-type illness. And therefore Elizabeth is the Mistress of Longbourn. And then I switched away from Pride and Prejudice and went to Mansfield Park and revisit Mansfield Park, How Fanny Married Henry by Sarah Oskandali. So this is the only real Mansfield Park variation I found that I like, in that it actually, through writing each other letters, while Fanny's in Portsmouth, she gets to know Henry better and understand him more, and they fall in love that way. So it's actually him changing himself and letting her get to know him, rather than her having to change her mind, kind of thing. So I quite enjoy that. And I also reread The Angel of Longbourn by Jan Roland. Like 4 Jan Roland books. I needed comfort. And so that one is one where Darcy comes down with typhoid fever and falls off his horse and is found by Lizzie. So, shenanigans. I also finally managed to pick up How to Marry a Werewolf by Gail Carriger. That is one of her self-published novellas in the Parasolverse. And this is the story of how Channing of the Chesterfield Channings, a member of the London Pack, the Gamma of the London Pack, who is grumpy and unpleasant and very, very handsome, managed So it's very funny, like most of Gal Carriger's stuff is. And hit all my buttons in terms of grumpy males falling in love, which is kind of a thing with me in fanfiction, and this hit all those buttons and I just loved it. So I'm really pleased I finally picked up How to Marry a Werewolf. So I followed that up by rereading Romancing the Werewolf, which is one of the earlier novellas, and is a Christmas one where Biffy, the new alpha of the London pack, and Professor Lyle are finally reunited after 20 years apart. And it's romantic, and there's accidental baby acquisition, which is also a fabulous fanfiction trope. So that was fun. So I really enjoyed that, rereading that. And then, I'm still going, like I said, I read 14 things, but they were all, I don't think I actually read a novel at all, because even the Jan Rowland stuff is quite short. Like, I suppose they're technically novels, but they're actually quite short, so they're probably more novella length than anything. But I finished Gods, Monsters and the Lucky Peach by Kelly Robson, which is on the novella list for the Hugos. Didn't like it. It was, yeah, it took me a lot to get through it. I think, there's an awful lot of corporate speak in it, like project plans and all this kind of scientific stuff, which just is not my thing. And particularly in the first half, there was a whole lot of world building that was just like stuffed in without the underlying understanding. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's apparently happened and we're building this world, but I just didn't grasp any of it really. Like, it was really hard to like understand, okay, but why, what's happening? I'm not sure. So yeah, I didn't really like that one. Then I finished off the month by finishing the last 3 short stories on the short story list. Stet by Sarah Gailey, which was a so read. It was sort of an article about AIs driving cars and the decisions they make, which can lead to people being killed, with notes from the editor and then stet notes from the author. It was, looking, one of those things kind of terrifying, I think, about AI, because how can we program them to make the proper decisions, to choose between human life and, in this case, a rare species of woodpecker. Yeah. So, but still, it was a so-so read. I also read The Secret Lives of the 9 Negro Teeth of George Washington by Paige Jelly Clark. Again, so-so read. It was sort of a fantastic... I can only assume that George Washington actually had 9 teeth that he used as dentures, because I assume slave teeth would have made good dentures. But, there was a different story behind each tooth, and who the person was who had originally had that tooth. So it was kind of an interesting look at that period of American history, but again, sort of a so-so read. And then I finished up with A Witch's Guide to Escape, a practical compendium of portal fantasies, which was, it was nice, and it was kind of really sad, and it was about, like, a librarian who is a librarian but also a witch, and so guards certain types of books, and uses magic to try and, when people need a particular type of book, they try and match them up. And it was about a child who was clearly disadvantaged and probably in a foster home and probably being abused, to be honest, discovering portal fantasy and the librarian's decision to actually match him up with a book that she wasn't supposed to that would help him escape. So that was a bit depressing. And that was what I read in June. Like I said, 14 things, but 14 pretty short things and a lot of rereading because my brain just needed it. But I think that the standout for me was How to Marry a Werewolf. I absolutely loved it. So I think I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. So yay! Haven't yet read anything in the first week of July. It's been that kind of week. I had a choir performance to stress about, but hopefully going to get some stuff read this weekend. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of those stories, if you liked them, or if you want to know any more about them, just let me know in the comments. And I will see you all again really soon. Bye.